Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to be here today. Standing in the halls of Beekman is an incredibly wonderful and thrilling time for me every time I come here. If you remember when I first started this job, the first school that I came to visit was Beekman. Special education is very near and dear to my heart, but being a superintendent, my first job and my first responsibility is to always put all of our children first. And for years, for decades, for more than half a century, the Beekman Center has been putting children first and making sure that special ed children with extra needs were being served in the best way possible. Thanks to Marvin Beekman and his incredible foresight, as well as all sorts of wonderful advocates in the special ed community in the 60s, they said, you know what's great is you need to understand that children that might have special needs should be treated with the greatest and most respect possible. They should have beautiful buildings. They should have great facilities. They should have absolutely the best education possible. And that's what the Beekman Center did in the 60s. They created something at the vanguard. They created something at the forefront of what great pedagogy was for our children. And then I'm reminded of a quote that's usually ascribed to the revolution of 1848, the French Revolution, not the one you all know from the 1700s, where one of the leaders says, you know, they are my people, I must follow them. And the idea is that in the 60s, the Beekman Center was at the vanguard. It was the best place to be. And a lot of people saw that and they said, you know what we need to do? We need to do something like the Beekman Center. We need to figure out a way to bring special ed kids together with the greatest service and the great support. And that's where the ISDs came in. And so starting in really the 70s, the ISDs came together and said, we need to support our special ed children in the best way possible. And we're lucky that today really is the end of an era. Throughout Michigan, multiple center-based programs like Beekman have shut down and transferred over to the ISD. And really the last one standing is Beekman. And it's standing because of the great work, because of what Marvin Beekman did, the Beekman family, the teachers at Beekman, the students at Beekman, saying that Beekman is this wonderful place. But now it's time, they are the people we must follow. The world has changed. What the world has changed is to say the ISDs are where this great and wonderful work happens. Our staff, terrific. Our students, our families, terrific. But the structure of special ed is now different. And so today I stand before you to say, as a superintendent, my job is always to put students first. And when we put students first, we have to be honest with ourselves, is if the way that we support our children currently is the right way to do it, and the answer overwhelmingly is no. The right way to do this is to make sure that the ISD, which is absolutely built to support special ed kids, are able to do that moving forward. And that's why I've been so thankful to the Beekman family, to the staff of Beekman, to the families of Beekman to understand that. But the great partner in all this has been the ISD. After I speak, a person who really deserves so much of the credit is Jason Mellema, the superintendent of the ISD, along with his staff, that they said, you know what, Ben, it is the right thing to do. And it was a huge amount of work. It's an amazing amount of effort from the ISD, from Jason and his team. But they also knew that when you put children first, the decisions to do what's right are pretty apparent. And so I want to thank Sergio Keck, our deputy superintendent, Eileen Prahota, our senior director of special ed, Lori Abbott-Smith, the principal of Beekman, and all of the incredible staff at Beekman, the families at Beekman, to understand that this is not the end, but it is a new beginning for even better things for our children. And so in the 60s, more than half a century ago, Beekman represented the vanguard of what education was going to be for special ed. And what today represents is us acknowledging that there's a new vanguard. There's a new, better way to do that. And that is to have the ISD be in charge of center-based programming. And so I am thrilled. I am not sad at all that the keys to Beekman and the running of Beekman and the support of Beekman is going to be in the very, very capable hands of Jason Mellema, the ISD of Ingham, and all of the great staff there, which will, of course, include so many of the great staff that currently are here who will continue to serve our children for hopefully years to come. So with that, I want to turn it over to Jason for him to say some words and to really thank him publicly and his team for the incredible partnership that today represents. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Ben mentioned privilege and responsibility, and I think those are two fantastic words to start out. Every day as educators, we have the privilege to be able to serve your students that come into our classrooms, that come into our buildings, come into our facilities to help them reach their potential and make sure they can be successful in life. And with that comes the responsibility to make sure that we are instilling best practices in how we operate. Ben kind of mentioned that this is a historic center. This was the first of its kind. The Marvin Beekman Center, named after Marvin Beekman, a champion of those with special needs going back to the 60s. And since that point in time, it's been a model that has served as an example for others to come. We look forward to ways to continue to be that privilege and how we serve students here, as well as that model as we look forward in the equitable opportunities and to maximize the resources when we think about serving our students with the greatest amounts of special needs, or the ways that we look at it, the students who sometimes need the greatest amount of love. And so it's a neat privilege and responsibility that we have today as we transition with our partners from the Lansing School District to make this move. Going back to 1968, when this facility was created, it was created in partnership with the Intermediate School District. There were funds that were received from the special education millage that actually helped with this construction project. So in some ways, it's kind of come full circle to be able to look at the programs and services, to work through this transition, and to continue to move forward in ways that we best serve those students. So we're excited for this opportunity for the families, for the students, for all the caregivers who support them, to be able to be moving into a new step, a new direction, but still focused on our students. We're excited to be able to take this step to be the last ISD here in the state in the advancement of this, but we think the right move at the right time to make sure that we're going to provide those services moving forward. And we're excited to work through this transition. We know that as parents, as a parent myself, right, every day you send your child to school, you take that leap of faith, and we want to continue to make that social promise to make sure that your children are going to be in good hands, that they're going to be served, that they're going to be protected, that they are going to be given the opportunities to be successful. And so this is a unique opportunity for us to join with the Lansing School District. We've been able to partner with them for over a year now in working through the transition for this. We will continue to work on this transition up through July 1st when it will actually happen, officially at that point in time. But this has been a joint effort from our boards of education, from leadership. Ben and his staff, Superintendent Shuldiner, as they should reference, and his staff have been fantastic in working through this. Our staff internally, I want to recognize Crystal Cutler, our Executive Director of Special Education, Susan Tinney, our Assistant Superintendent for HR, other cabinet members who have been involved, including the communication staff who have worked through and just wondered about how do we do this in a way that honors the paths of the Beekman family, that respects the students and the families that are here and continues to grow moving forward. And so this is a great opportunity. I'm extremely excited about it. It gives us ways to continue to grow, to continue to improve, and to do what we know is most important, and that's serving all learners. So I thank you for that opportunity. I'll invite Lynn Beekman from the Beekman family. These are the people who, at the heart of it, Ben and I are stewards at this point in time in leadership, but this is a family who has created a legacy when we think about the opportunities for those students with special needs. So glad to welcome them to the stage.
Thank you. Well, on behalf of my family, I want to thank the Lansing School District and the Ingham County Intermediate School District for this opportunity to participate in this event. I'd also like to note that another member of the family, Bill Beekman, the Vice President out at MSU, is here to keep an eye on me to make sure if I screw up, he can report back to the family. At the outset, I'd like to note as a matter of disclosure that I am a recovering lawyer at this point in time. But during my 30 years in representing clients on special ed matters, which included a lot of parents with kids with disabilities, the MEA, and about 350 school districts. I had the privilege of representing both the Lansing School District and the Intermediate School District for several years. And it was the usual fun in special ed times. Turning to the reason why we're here today, the Beekman Center was opened in 1968. Quite frankly, although you all look young to me, many of you were not around then, or you were too young to remember it. But in 1968, there was no mandate for special ed, either federally or in the state of Michigan. With that, most students with disabilities stayed home. There were a few that were in private programs, but most of them were home. And that was true around the country. But in 1968, the district was one of the few school districts that offered a lot of special ed programs to students with various types of disabilities. In fact, they offered far more than any other district. Parents would come in from all over to get their child in the Lansing public schools. With the opening of the Beekman Center in 1968, the district took on the challenge of addressing the educational needs of those students with disabilities with the most varied and complex needs you could ever imagine. They're often referred to as low-incidence students because they do not occur that much in the population of students which the public schools serve. At that time, as Ben and Jason have alluded to, this building was the cutting edge of special ed, not only in Michigan, but around the country. Over the last 56 years, and I have participated in special ed for all 56 of them, special ed has changed one hell of a lot, as it should. But most importantly, Michigan got special ed mandated in '73, and the feds mandated it in '75. At that juncture, local school districts and intermediate school districts had to provide programming, and the intermediate in our state really took a leading role in providing programs for services with low incidence rates. One example would be Hartwood Schools here in Mason. These programs are referred to in the special ed world as center programs because the surrounding districts where the center program is offered normally will only have a few low incidence kids. So the laws with regard to special ed allow center programs so that the students with few of a particular type of kid with a disability can send their children to a center program, in our state operated by the ISDs, in order that they do not each have to develop a program and operate a program for each type of disability. With the growth of center programs over the years, the operation of the few programs like Beekman Center have all been transitioned to ISDs, as Ben and Jason mentioned, with this building and its programs being the last one. The reasons for all of these transitions and the reason for the transition of the Beekman Center to the ISD, I believe, is well-founded. With the ISD operating both the center-based programs in Ingham County, or in the intermediate district, they can be coordinated. The programs can be coordinated, and the students they serve will have more equitable options, and those options can be provided much more efficiently and, most importantly, more effectively for the students with disabilities that are being served. It's for these reasons that our family fully supports the transition of the operation of the Beekman Center to the Ingham Intermediate School District. And thank you again for the opportunity to express these comments.
So without further ado, if we got questions from the gallery, I'll invite the superintendents up. If you have any questions for them, go right ahead.
I think I have a question. Where will this new facility be at?
So we're still using the building. Okay. It's just the keys will be in Jason's hand and not mine. So.
On the same kind of
building and then the Equine Center for Learning out back, will those be combined in this transition or included?
So I'll answer about the Equine Center. So one of the great things about this plot of land is there's many, many acres. So the building, the parking lot, all the stuff for the school will be in the ISD's hands. The horses are still going to be part of Lansing, although we'll happily let the children play with them.
Are you interested in riding lessons?
It's really
Can you kind of talk about just a few of the pros of having this transition happen?
Sure. You know, I think all three of us referenced this in similar terms, but some of this is around equitable opportunities when we think about how do we connect the right dots to serve these students. So Mr. Beekman eloquently mentioned low incident students, and our staff would be glad to speak with you much more in depth to really understand what those areas are if you have any questions afterwards. But when we think about low incident students, rarely do districts have large numbers of those students, right? So if you have a student in your district, you have two students with a certain needs, and you have another district with two students with those similar needs, you can combine those resources and gain not only the professional strengths that you have and how do we support the students, but also the opportunities as we think about the economies of scale. So within our system here in Ingham ISD, we've had a bifurcated system, dual systems, Beekman and Hartwood, that have been operated by the Lansing School District again since 1968. Hartwood started in the 70s. And so this gives us an opportunity to look at how do we maximize professional development? How do we share those resources? How do we think about those opportunities? Those are so important because we're talking about low numbers of students. It's not, the best way to probably describe it, there are elementary schools in every district. There are two of these schools that exist in our ISD of 42,000 students. So how do we work together to best serve those students and those staff and all the caretakers that support those students?
Yeah, and the other thing to add, really to Jason and the ISD's credit, is ISDs are built for these kinds of schools. I mean, what Lynn was talking about and what I sort of referenced is, 50 years ago, there wasn't that infrastructure of the ISD. The ISD is specifically for low incident, for at risk, for all these support mechanisms. A school district like Lansing with 10,000 students is really built for other kinds of programs. And it would be derelict for me as the superintendent to say, no, we should do everything for everybody, not as great as we can do the best for the children that we were built to serve, and really thank and support and partner with the ISD who's doing it in this kind of exceptional way and also was built. I mean, Lynn said, this is the last of its kind because the whole state of Michigan has moved towards a newer and better model. And that's where we are thankful that through all of our partnerships, we're able to do that starting July 1st.
Two for one question, so I'm sure we're going to have some families, curious when they could get their students enrolled here at the Beekman Center. So one, what's that timeline looking like? And then two, about how much room do you guys have for additional students? If that makes sense.
Oh, it makes sense.
So students don't voluntarily necessarily enroll at either Hartwood or Beekman. When we think about our students with special needs, they have individualized education plans known as IEPs, and those IEPs direct the services and support that students need. So on the scale of services and support, students that attend Beekman or Hartwood are the students that need the highest level of support. From a federal standpoint, I believe there's only one level that's further above that, and those are typically homebound services, which are infrequently used, rare, just obviously based on the needs of students. So this is considered really one of the most restrictive environments we have. So we look at least restrictive environment, which is how we try to educate students. The majority of our students work in a least restrictive environment inside our traditional schools, like the Lansing School District has. And then we work through that process based on their IEP and what the students' needs are. And this would be considered one of the most restrictive environments. So students don't necessarily enroll here. This is a spot where they're served based on the needs that might be in their IEP.
So it would be something the school districts are handling on the back end, figuring out where is the best spot for students.
That's right.
And then I want to follow up again about how many more students could you guys hold here at the Beekman Center?
So I don't know if it's about how many more students we could hold. I think the question is how many more students have the needs that would be in this environment, because the law restricts us. We don't just place students into the Beekman Center. It's based on least restrictive environment, which is out of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDDA. And so in this situation, what we're going to be looking at actually, as we do with any of the programs and services we run, right, is identifying within the infrastructure, the technology, the systems, the processes, how do we continue to improve, and what are the right ways to serve the student populations that we have. So this is a facility, as I referenced, that was created in 1968, right? The Hartwood School was created in the 70s. You know, those are all systems and processes that we're trying to understand. How do we educate students in 2024? So those connections we have to continue to work through. So I don't think it's about a size thing. This isn't a schools of choice. This isn't competitive. This is about serving students from all 12 of our traditional local districts, the 8 charter schools, for students that have the highest level of special needs.
Yeah. The best way that I can try to explain it is our job is to service all of the children in the county the best way we can. We will make space for any children and any child that needs the support. What that support looks like could be Beekman, it could be Hartwood, it could be Sexton, it could be Willow, it could be, I'm sure there's schools in East Lansing, right? I don't know what they're called. East Lansing High, right? You know, that's how we service kids. So as Jason said, it's not about the seats per se. It's that our job is to always keep all of our children front and center. And if they have a need, we will serve them.
So you're not hurting for space by any means.
I don't believe that to be accurate at this point in time. This is about serving students, again, in the least restrictive environment. The students that would be here, their IEPs would have identified this environment provides them the right levels of support to be able to be successful. Yeah. And so that's what we're looking at. But that combination between all of the school districts, Ben referenced this earlier, as an intermediate school district, really we focus on 3 areas: special education, career technical education, and then the general education services, professional development, operations side. We typically don't have students that are in general education type classes that you would see. There are different ways that we serve, but we believe that model strengthens all of us, because it allows us to best focus on the students in the economies of scale, again, maximizing opportunities and making efficiencies with our resources.
I think Mr. Beekman had something to add as well.
Jason mentioned the IEP, the Individualized Educational Program team. And I think it's important. Some might get the impression that it's the school district's decision and its staff in terms of whether a child comes to Beekman or Hartwood or whatever. That's only partially true, because the parent is a mandated member of this IEP team, and they are considered an equal partner. And so they have a big voice in whether their child is, where their child is served and how in terms of special ed. And I'm sure these gentlemen know that
Absolutely.
well as I do.
All 3 of us have sat on IEP meetings.
Hours.
Many times.
But I think that's an important thing for those who aren't as deeply involved in the special ed process, because the parents really play a very critical role.
Sarah, do you have a question?
Yeah, so Ben, you said that special education has changed in the last couple decades.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that, and then also elaborate on why you think that the Lansing School District wasn't serving the needs of the students to the level that you thought they should be at? Can you give a couple examples?
Yeah, of course. So, you know, as we've mentioned now repeatedly, Beekman was created more than 50 years ago. Back then, as Lynn said, there wasn't even a federal mandate. So it was really on the kind of beneficence of the school district if they were going to serve the children or not. Since the federal government and state governments have gotten involved, there's been a whole host of mandates that are really good for children. Laws have changed, experiences have changed, what best practices have changed. So when this building was built more than 50 years ago, it was built for the vanguard of that time. So if you go to Hartwood now, you'll see things that are very different than here. There's different pedagogy, there's different curriculum, there's different ways of training, there's all sorts of things that we still do here, but this building, this facility is from the 60s. And so we want to make sure that we're giving all of our children, the Lansing students, the Okemos students, the East Lansing students, the best of all possibilities. And by shifting the responsibility to the ISD, you're now able to get the people that are now at the vanguard of doing the best work. And so how have I mean, I think you all know I'm pretty blunt about my assessment of Lansing. We have incredible staff, incredible children. We're working very, very hard. But, Beekman is still a 1960s building. It's still 50 years old. It's still in a way that needs to be updated. And I think that when we partner with the ISD, when we work together with them, they're able to bring their expertise. I mean, as Jason said, the ISD is built for really two things: special ed, CTE. The Lansing School District is built for like a bajillion things. And so we want to make sure that we're going to the experts. And that's no knock on our staff. Our staff is wonderful, our kids, our families. But imagine how much better things can be if the organization that's running it, one of their sole, well, not sole, because that would be only one, they have them all, but one of their main ideas and main premises is to support special ed. That's why you do this. You put kids first and you say, who's the best at it? The ISD is the best at it. Right? So that's why.
And I would just add, it's not about right or wrong.
Right.
Like, I want people to make sure of this. We're not right, they're not wrong, they're not right, we're not wrong. It's the ways in which we focus in to make sure that we serve students, right? So we have a different focus than what a traditional general education district would have, right? So our focus is just different. And because of that, that allows us to do certain things. Graduation rates necessarily isn't one of our areas of focus. We serve students and try to figure out how to improve their graduation rates within the local districts, right? So they're just nuances in how that works, but that partnership is where the strengths are. So we believe we're better together on this, and that's that whole philosophy that we have, and how do we best serve these students?
And the best, data point I can give is everybody else in the state of Michigan has done it, right? There's a reason why. The reason is ISDs are built for this. Local traditional public school districts are not. They were in 1960. Why? Because nobody else was doing it. There wasn't even a law that said you had to do it. So Lansing was doing amazing work saying, boy, these kids really need some support. Let's give it to them. Now you've got a whole infrastructure that didn't even exist that really is there to serve our children. So that's why.
You want a cool future piece? Talk to the Beekman family about what happened back in the 60s and how we got to where we're at. Because Lynn mentioned this, and he was, in my opinion, he was not as proud as he could have been. He was being humble. This was the Beekman Center was the first school in the nation to serve students with low incidence. This, to my knowledge, is the first school in the world as well. From that point in time, Lynn Beekman went on to not only write legislation here within the state, but nationally, and then assisted internationally. We are talking about a mountain of a person when it comes to advocating for those students who sometimes don't have the voice to be able to do so. Those students who need the most amount of support, those students who need the most amount of love. This is a huge thing that exists right here within the Lansing area that we're very proud to be able to partner on. We don't take this lightly. This is a big deal to work with this family who had the foresight to recognize how to advocate on behalf of those who couldn't. And so it's pretty cool. You want a feature story? I'll tell you right now. Talk to this guy afterwards. He'll give you more than enough.